Hey friends, Editor Tim here with a couple quick announcements before we get this episode started. As you can see, this episode is not in our traditional format, so this is another experimental proof of concept episode where we're just trying to figure out where the podcast might go once we're done with home movies. One of the things we thought is maybe we can pick up another TV show, and Moral Orel was one we wanted to try. If you like these experimental formats, let us know. Send us an email at rhmpod@gmail.com. If you're still trying to figure out your New Year's resolution, maybe you should resolve to leave us a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify, or just help us spread the word of the podcast. And last but not least, we'd like to wish you all a safe and happy New Year. We'll be back next week with our regular format. Until then, please enjoy rewatching Moral Orel. The globe is just the USA. Adele even pointed out there's no Canada, there's no Mexico.
No Mexico, and that's just the way God would want it.
Hello, and welcome to Rewatching Moral Orel, a possibly weekly watch-along podcast where three friends break down the 2005 stop-motion series Moral Orel. My name is Martin, and I have religious trauma.
My name's Adele, and I am also dripping with religious trauma.
My name is Tim, and I've never had religious trauma.
What's that like, really? Truly,
Yeah.
I'm asking for me and for my friends.
Feels warm? I don't know.
Warm and happy?
I don't know how else to describe it. There's just this feeling like I'm not being judged.
If I'm being honest, though, I'm very fortunate in that aspect. I understand. But this is actually the byproduct of both of my parents, each holding their own religious trauma, and coming to the consensus that they as parents would not force religion upon their children. So I understand. I did get very lucky in that aspect. It wasn't like my parents were like, hell yeah, fuck all. No, it was like my dad went to Catholic school and had to deal with a lot of that. My mom had, to deal with religion as well. And
as bad as it is now, it was worse when they were kids, for sure.
I've always had the utmost respect for my parents for being raised in that environment and both consciously deciding, like, no, if we truly love our kids like we say we do, we're not going to force them to do that.
Yeah.
So that's where my lack of religion kind of comes into play. So even though I'm not a child that carries religious trauma, I am the byproduct of two people who did. So I think that's very important.
I have so much respect for your family for seeing that.
Yeah.
Oh, my parents, I have a lot of respect of in a lot of ways. I mean, age-wise, they are boomers, but that's about it as far as age-wise. That's the only aspect of boomers that they are. Maybe in not quite understanding technology all the time. But besides that, they're two absolutely wonderful, beautiful people. And I know my mom does sometimes regret not having religion in our lives more. But we remind her that out of her 4 kids, like, we're all essentially good people. And we didn't have to be brought up with religion to know, like, this is good, this is bad, and know the difference and just be nice and kind and respectful.
Me, Ed, and Nick actually just watched the first season of True Detective, and a big part of that is about religion versus nihilism and like where the lines. And one of the quotes is, if you need a book to tell you what not to do, you're not a good person. You're just afraid of consequences. Because, Tim, I think you're like one of the most kindest people I've ever met, and it's nothing short of because of your parents. Your parents are just also amazing people.
Yeah, 100% a testament of my parents.
I would love to have your parents on this podcast. I would love to hear what they have to say.
Last time I was over there, Tim's dad was like, I'm reading this book about Jesus and how, like, things really were. I don't remember what book it was, but I was like, yes, Jeff. Let's talk about Jesus and how it's all a lie.
Jesus Christ, superstar. I re-listened to the first episode of Home Movies to kind of get the vibe of how we started. That was one of the things that we talked about, religious trauma and how it really just sinks into every single thought and every facet of your day.
Oh, yeah.
Which is part of the reason I wanted to do this, at least try to do this test episode. So for everybody listening, this is a test pilot to see how, is it proof of concept, to see how we'll go along with this. which is why I didn't go too in-depth into the history of the show, but I just grazed the surface. Mostly I focused on the creator of the show, and I am definitely going to butcher his name.
Can I try?
Yes, you can.
Is it Dino Stapalopoulos?
Yeah. Okay. Yes, you were right. I also, for a while, was calling him Dino because I didn't know.
Some Dino Nuggies.
You want to go deep? Did you ever watch the show Community? Either of you?
I did. That's part of the notes. If you wanted to take it from me a little bit.
Well, I was just gonna say he's Starburns in Community. So his character is actually, he has sideburns that come down, and then there's a star on his cheek.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and he's called Starburns. That's Dino.
I did not know that he was on Community. I know he was a writer and producer for Community. He was also a writer on Mary Shelley's Frankenhole and the stop-motion movie Anomalisa, which is, just to avoid the side tangent, it's a really, really good movie. It's such a wonderful work of art.
I was going to say, when you said Frankenhole, it sounded very familiar. I recall that being also a stop-motion animation with kind of a very dark vibe about it. I think. I don't recall completely.
He seems to have a type, or at least an interest in stop-motion. Me, myself, also love stop-motion. I haven't watched Marcel yet because that one, I've been told, will wreck my heart. Memoir of a Snail, I believe, that just came out. Adventures of Mark Twain was one I grew up on. Tim Burton, stop motion. How do you guys feel about stop motion?
I always liked stop motion. I understand that a lot of people find it creepy looking. So I understand that aspect of it, but I like the fact that it's creepy looking. Plus it takes a fucking long ass time to do, and that's respectable in and of itself.
In the late 90s, early 2000s, I was a huge fan of the band Tool. A lot of their music videos were stop motion, not just stop motion, but also with kind of that darker themes about them. I traditionally, when I think stop motion, I always kind of think back to Tool music videos. And I don't know why, but stop motion to me always is a darker vibe. From Nightmare Before Christmas to Corpse Bride to, I don't know, anytime I think stop motion, I always think darker, both lighting and content.
And I'm surprised none of us brought up the best stop motion, which is James and the Giant Peach.
Right.
I love James and the Giant Peach. I've always just had a thing for stop motion. I'm sure you guys watch the Christmas movies, the stop motion ones.
Oh, yeah. The reindeer and all that shit.
I think my favorite one was probably The Misers, but only because...
Hell yeah, dude.
I'm Mr. Heat Miser.
Didn't Community have an episode where it was in stop motion or that style? And I think it was even a Christmas one too. So maybe Dino, his influence and love of stop motion kind of bleeds into a lot of the stuff he works on.
He talks a lot about his love for stop motion. God, I wish I wrote this down. But when he looked at Moral Orel, he looked at it between a cross between Leave It to Beaver and Davy and Goliath, which was another not super heavy-handed with religious tension, but they always seem to just stuff a religious message at the end of the episode. There's an interview I found with him from, let me see, teamorel.com/interviews.
Team Orel.
He did an interview that was actually very insightful. He talks about his time as a writer on Mad TV, SNL, David Letterman, the Dana Carvey Show, and the Ben Stiller and Conan O'Brien. He was a writer on a lot of things. Now, I could be mixing them up between the Conan O'Brien Show and the David Letterman Show. I think it was David Letterman, but he said in the interview that when he was working on that show, he felt very stagnant because all of his other jobs that he's had felt like his career evolved. But when he got to this show, I believe it was Letterman, he felt like he was just on top of this puffy dinosaur that wasn't going to change or anything. And he immediately was like, not for me, and he let his contract just go away. But while this was happening, this is when he started perfecting the script that he was writing for Iggy Pop. Don't necessarily know much about Iggy Pop, but I know that they were a musician, and Iggy Pop didn't like it. They didn't meet where they needed to meet for it to happen. When it didn't go anywhere, that's when the show kind of evolved from this script. A little bit about Dino. He is originally from Norwich, Illinois, but guess what class he was?
What year he graduated?
Uh-oh.
Was it class of 83?
It was class of 83.
Holy shit, good guess.
With McGurk.
Wow. That's dope.
He does vocals and guitar for a band called Sorry About Everything. They had an album that came out in 2017, like a couple of them, and Don't Blame the Moon was a song that I listened to, and it quickly became something I kept listening to. It's very good. I did want to do some history of the show, how they made it, why they made it, how they got their start, but this episode's more of a test, so I wanted to hold back for future possible installments. But to get a couple points of trivia about the show, elephant in the room, this show was canceled in 2008 during its third season.
Damn.
When 5 seasons were originally planned.
Yeah, it was canceled abruptly.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
It was like that, like shocking?
They cut the amount of episodes the third season was supposed to have in half.
Wow.
From most sources, the best reasoning was that Adult Swim found that the show was getting too dark, even though that is exactly what they asked for. And I don't want to get into the content of the script and the episode, but the second Adult Swim got their eyes on a draft of the episode titled Alone, that was when the decision was quickly made. They got a draft for the episode, and instead of changing the episode and making the team completely go in a different direction, they said, you know what, we're just gonna... This is the line. You get to cross this line, but after that, you get to face the consequences of crossing this line.
Well, I have no idea what the last episode entails, and I'm going to hold off until we actually watch it. But, like, I just don't... The title gives nothing away.
Right.
What could possibly have happened in that episode where they say, if you go this route, it's going to be canceled? And they were like, well, we still want to do it.
Yeah.
Like, what... I mean, obviously don't tell me, but I'm just... Episode 1, I'm speculating, like, what could they have possibly said or
Right.
done?
Where can we go from here
That
that
was
puts
like-
us in a position that Adult Swim...
Yeah.
I mean, the stuff that Adult Swim was airing,
Mm-hmm.
one of the shows was literally called Assy McGee because the character was an ass.
Yep.
So this show was 100% stop motion. Like, it was filmed in traditional stop motion style.
Incredible choice, because Dino said in the interview that he was worried about how expensive it was going to be, but because they shared a studio with Robot Chicken, or because they got to share a studio with Robot Chicken, it actually cut the expenses back. Do you ever mess with their stuff? They asked about the Robot Chicken studio. And they said, no, I don't want to get fart jokes all over my clothes. That stuff never comes off. So there's a bit of, like, I don't know if it's friendly banter, but there's definitely something going back and forth between the two teams. I don't know what it is, but throughout the other interviews, he does kind of, like, make little humorous remarks towards the Robot Chicken team. Also fun trivia. I found this one on IMDb. Dino was on cocaine as he wrote the show.
Damn.
Here's a tidbit. You know who helped write this? Cocaine.
But I don't know if that might give the audience a better understanding of where the episodes go and how wild they get. From what I've read about it, he's never, like, blamed the substance. Everyone says that the show is an incredible work of art. In fact, in order to do some research on the show, I went to the subreddit for Moral Orel just to see how the community engages with new folks. I went into the community and I said, I've never seen the show before. I want to know as much info as I can of what I need to know before I go into the show, because sometimes there's, like, little tidbits here and there. But there is a lot of different comments that I got on the post, and one of them that I wanted to highlight. As a person who also has lots of religious trauma, when I take a lot of LSD or mushrooms, they ego death. Moral Orel actually helped me a lot.
Oh, I love that.
I
need that.
Yeah. I just wanted to throw this little interaction from the interview. It was a question asked of Dino. It says, Randy Newman once said he would kill his mother for a good song. What would you do for a good episode? And he says, I suppose the standard comedy answer would be kill Randy Newman's mother, but I assume she's already dead. Short People is a very good song. So I love the sense of humor that Dino is going in with this. He's he doesn't seem to punch down a lot. To understand why Dino wrote the show, one of the other interviews in the TeamOrel.com interview was, did you go to church as a kid? And I was very surprised by this because Dino says that he wasn't super religious as a kid. He wasn't, like, forced to go or anything. And I'm going to quote him here. Every now and then my parents caught the God bug and my brother and I would have to go. It was a Greek Orthodox church, and everything was in Greek, so I barely understood what was going on, and I really hated it. That may have been what really turned me off to organized religion. Who cares if you intellectually understand it? Just go through the motions. God will soak through your skin. It was a nightmare. And everyone who went to church was repulsive to me. All the men and boys in bad polyester suits, and the horrible Greek women in their makeup and pantyhose and lipstick. I actually threw up a lot in church. I was like Damien in The Omen. George Carlin said, I liked church. It was a weekly reminder that there was something worse than school. I felt that exact same way. That said, though, when I was about 11 or 12, I did think about God a lot. You know, the good old fear of death really kicks in eventually. I remember when I was about 4, I started crying because I suddenly realized I was going to die someday, and that didn't really go down good with me. And my dad tries to ease my fear by telling me I wouldn't die for a very long time. Didn't help. Of course, God and heaven did help. That's what they're there for, right? Anyway, for a while there, I'd sit at school and smugly think, I bet I'm the only one in this class thinking about God right now. I was very pious that way. Very orally. He definitely comes from the perspective of Orel. Orel is, I wouldn't say his insert character, but I feel for a lot of people growing up in these organized religions, you do feel like Orel at a certain point. And as Tim has pointed out, you don't have religious trauma, so I definitely would like to see your opinions on certain ways that you handled this. Like in this episode, Orel talks about death. When you're a kid, finding out about death, that's a really intense thing. And I think it's something that really hits us. But when you're in this organized religion, it kind of sets you down a path of confusion for a lot of kids. I wanted to start off this episode with asking you how you two handled death when you were kids, when you first found out about death.
I mean, obviously, growing up in the church, like, you're told, like, it's okay if you die because you're going to go to heaven if you're a good person. And you have this, like, idea of, like, it's okay if I die because at least there's something to go to. So finding out about death when I was a kid, it really didn't scare me because it was kind of painted as this, like, beautiful picture of, like, you'll be reunited with your grandparents and all these people. And, you know, so as a kid, I didn't really have, like, that existential dread about it. It wasn't until probably, oh God, because I broke away from the church when I was 15. And at that point I was so cynical, I really didn't give a fuck what was afterwards. But when you get to, like, college age and it kind of sets in, like, it is a very scary thing. I think I'm very fortunate that I didn't really come to terms of that as a child. I think it would have been a lot harder to kind of work through that as a kid. Not to say it wasn't fucking the worst as an adult, because it's I think it kind of hits you more in a more realistic way where you can kind of explain it away to a child. What about you?
I don't know. I guess I never really experienced death firsthand until, I mean, like, obviously, yeah, you get to a point where you're aware of death, and I think with that comes the realization that everyone is going to die, not just yourself, but then everyone you love. So, you know, that's pretty tough to deal with when you're a kid and you figure that out. But I mean, I didn't lose my grandparents until I was like over 18. I think I didn't lose my first friend until I was like 18 or older. So for the longest time, death, it was like a concept I was very aware of and very much understood, but it was never so directly affected me. When I was really, really young, my great-grandmother passed away, but I was so young that conversation was kind of my mom pulling all the kids to the side one day and being like, your great-grandma Smith is passed. She's not going to be here anymore. Okay, go play. And that was kind of that, you know what I mean? So I guess once I got older and I had my first, I guess, firsthand experience with death, i.e. like a friend passing away, it was tough. It fucked me up for a good long time. But I think that's when I really started getting into trying to express myself creatively, either through poetry or I was doing a lot of kind of graphic design stuff back then too. So I don't know. I think that was when I really started, because the realization of like, oh yeah, shit. I mean, like, death is something that's always in the back of your head, but now it's in front of your face. So now it's like, holy shit, I don't know how long my time here is. I want to create. And I think that's too when I started expressing to my friends, like, hey, I love you guys.
Yeah.
Just throwing that out there.
Because you never know.
Right.
Have you ever heard of that story or seen the movie Miracles from Heaven?
I have not.
No.
It's a story based on a true thing where this really sick girl climbs a tree. She is basically sentenced to death as far as her disease is concerned, and she falls from a tree, and then she's taken to the hospital where they think she's going to die. But when they scan her, her disease is gone. That's just it. So the family considers this a miracle from God that took away this disease by letting her fall from this tree. And I bring this up only because there's a quote from the little girl in the book of the little girl when they're trying to explain to her that she might pass away. And she's like, well, that's okay. We'll just be with Jesus. And then you guys could kill yourselves and you'll also be with Jesus. That's kind of how I was taught about death. To my religious trauma, we were taught that this life doesn't matter. The next one does. We were just all happy that when people would die. We looked at it like celebration in a morbid way, but also I thought I didn't really focus on death because of that. Like death was just like a celebration, something, oh, they're in Jesus's arms and whatnot. So it never really hit me until much later on. Like I dealt with a lot of friends of mine passing away early on in my life. I didn't really get to that until much later when I broke off from the church, where it just kind of hit me and I'm like, oh shit.
I guess when I feel like I was like 14 or 15, and I had a great aunt who we just called Aunt, and she passed away. And the reason I remember this is because when we went to her services at whatever church, the service for my aunt's passing was like, I don't know, maybe like 30% like talking about, hey, she's passed, she was a good woman, so on and so forth. And then 70% like this guy being like, a lot of faces out there that I don't typically see here on Sundays.
Oh my God.
And it turned into like almost like an advertisement of the church. And that was the first time I was like, hey, what the fuck? What is that? What is that?
Obviously shouldn't be doing that anyway, but time and place, like somebody has died and you're using this opportunity to recruit members. Ooh. I'm going to try and not yell on this podcast, but it's going to be very hard.
Well, to that point of what Tim brought up, Adele, when I say the phrase lukewarm, how does that make you feel? Oh, the little smile there.
I got into it with a high school teacher of mine because I went to a Catholic high school and he was a religion teacher. He said agnostics, which I was agnostic at the time, was lukewarm. And it was a greater sin to be lukewarm than to be atheist because it's more offensive to sit on the fence. And he like spat upon agnostics. And I'm just like, excuse me. No.
I used to go to a mega church, like when I didn't have...
Really?
I bumped around a bunch of different other churches. My dad, it was always St. Anthony's. It was always that specific Catholic church. But my mom, she bumped around. We ended up at a mega church, and I will never forget the last church session I was ever a part of, because this guy was talking. He put a chair on the stage, and he was pretending like someone was sitting in it, and he said, like, these people, they come in here, and they sit here, and they pretend to be a good Christian, and when the basket comes around, they don't donate anything.
Ew.
Yeah, and you know what I say to that? And he kicked the chair off the stage. He said, you're not welcome in God's house because you're lukewarm.
Ew, dude. I'd get up and leave. Fuck that shit.
Me and Ed never went back.
Yeah.
There was...
My parents got a letter once from the church saying that they weren't giving... They gave money every single week, but they weren't giving enough money every single week.
That's it.
Because you're supposed to give them 15% of your yearly income.
Zoinks.
Yeah.
I will scream. This is why I wanted to go into this show. From what I've seen in the Reddit and from what everyone's been saying is like it's very healing, but it's also like when we watch home movies, McGurk shows up on screen, we laugh, but it's because the show is showing a mirror of like how stupid this is, and that's how I feel this entire show is. But that being said, you guys ready to get traumatized?
Again? Yes.
Oh.
My skin is thick.
Moral Oral Season 1, Episode 2?
What?
Huh?
Titled The Lord's Greatest Gift.
What happened to episode 1?
Is there a missing pilot somewhere?
So the episode we watched today, The Lord's Greatest Gift, was intended to be Season 1, Episode 1. However, Adult Swim said that this first episode was not clear enough as an introduction for people to the show. So what they ended up doing was they took the finale of the season and they made that the first episode.
Wait.
My brain.
Yeah, that's what I learned on the Reddit. So the Reddit was like, whatever you do not start at the Season 1, Episode 1 of when it was aired, because they aired the finale first on Adult Swim. They thought that was a better introduction.
But how are you going to say that the episode doesn't explain enough and establish enough, and then say, so we're going to take the Season 1 finale and air that first, zero context?
They felt like it was a better introduction to all of the characters and all of the plot points, when in reality, it was the end of those plot points.
Yeah.
Okay. So this episode that we just watched aired as the second episode. It aired second. Interesting.
And this is exactly what they wanted to be the intro, which is why I'm glad I looked it up. I'm glad I asked some questions about this. I don't want to watch this show that way, obviously. So when we get to the finale, that's the finale. But we're opening it up on episode 2, technically, The Lord's Greatest Gift.
Wow.
I gotta change my notes now. It says episode 1. I'm a total fool.
Can I borrow that pen when you're done? Thanks.
So we are in the introduction. The theme song plays. It's from the point of view of God as he zooms into State Soda.
But it's the globe. The globe is just the USA. Adelia pointed out there's no Canada, there's no Mexico.
No Mexico. And that's just the way God would want it.
There is no Canada, Mexico, or South America, as individualistic as it gets. God parts the clouds to a chorus of singing birds that he quickly swats away. One singing bird stays on God's finger, which he tries to shoo away, but decides best just flick it off. He then rips the roof off of his church, and we finally spot our main character, Orel Puppington, waving, as the title goes, Moral Orel.
Him ripping the roof off the church reminds me of that rhyme. Did you guys ever do the here's the church and here's
the steeple.
Nice.
Open it up
Yeah.
and
Open it
here's,
up
all,
and
the
here's
people.
all the people.
Yeah. Sometimes my dad would do that without any fingers. And he'd be like, where'd all the people go? And I'd be like, psh, they went to McDonald's.
Your dad's funny.
He is. He's a very funny man.
Let's get him on this podcast.
Oh, boy, you know that's never going to happen.
Who's just following around with a mic
Yeah.
like a goose with a knife. The episode starts with the Puppington family heading to church. They pass Forgetty's pub while listening to religious music, with some of the lyrics that you might love to hear. Reason is the enemy of faith, my friend.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Shapey, Orel's brother, is jumping around in the back seat like his name is Josie from Home Movies. Which also just a little bit of a trivia. Shapey, who is Orel's younger brother, is played by Dino's 6-year-old son.
Who does the voice of Orel?
Orel is actually the same person who plays Cindy Vortex from Jimmy Neutron.
Get the fuck out of here, really?
Yeah.
I know. I thought it sounded familiar.
She also plays Sandy Cheeks.
Wow.
They pass by Morrilton Theater that is playing Wizard of Oz, that's being protested by the church. They are screaming things like, follow the yellow brick road, means follow the devil in droves. The father smokes his pipe in the car and doesn't get down with the band Multiple Godgasm until he hears the lyrics, do Jesus' bidding, burn in heaven.
Burn in heaven. I definitely listened to Christian metal when I was really
That
young.
is so wild to me.
Evanescence is Christian.
Really?
Really, really.
Wow.
And Devil Wears Prada, Christian.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
When I was into like metal, like new metal, POD was the one that was like Christian, and everyone's like, what? But it's POD, like payable on death. Christian metal bands just never made sense to me.
If my parents were like, we don't like this, I'll be like, they're Christian.
They're Christian.
You gotta like them.
If they could hide the Christianity in the music, that's one thing, but then there would be bands that they tried to push on me as a child where they'd be singing like, give me that Christian side hug.
It's so cringy.
Like, they really wanted music that you were going to listen to and learn, oh, I need to not do this, or I need to do this.
One of the lyrics to the song before the metal song was talking about like not using your brain.
Yeah.
And then it said, no one's heard of the bleeding brain of Jesus.
Is there a soundtrack of this show somewhere?
There is.
There is?
Oh, shit.
What I've been told by the Reddit community is that the music is very good, and it's a spoiler for a lot of the story in the show, which is very interesting. People have said the soundtrack is their favorite parts of this show. So, again, I don't know anything, but I've been told that the music's amazing.
Well, just from episode 1, I was like, I need the soundtrack.
Yeah.
We arrive at church. The dad slams into his parking space, sending Shapey out the window. But Orel is too excited to even be concerned about his brother. He's excited to go to a church and be close with God. Inside, we meet Reverend Putty as he speaks to his congregation, saying that the biggest sin is to throw the gift of life back into God's stupid face, air quotes, and speaks about Lazarus. Orel is highly engaged while both Clay and Bloberta, his parents, make fun of the Reverend for repeating a sermon from 8 years prior.
Did you say his mom's name is Bloberta?
It's either Bloberta or Blauberta. They're all supposed to be references to Clay. Like, his dad's name is Clay, his brother's name is Shapey, his mom's name is Blob.
See, now that makes sense. I was like, the names of this show, I just don't understand. But the whole, like, judging the priest of what they say during the sermon, the elders of my family fucking loved that shit. Like, as soon as we got in the car after church, they'd be like, I cannot believe that Father Burnett decided to do that. He's so like, just going off. And it's just like, how very Christian of you guys.
And it's so funny, too, because they even mentioned, they're like, he did this 8 years ago.
Yeah.
I turned my brain off whenever I would walk into church. So how could you possibly remember a sermon made not even just 8 years ago, but last week? That was amazing to me that they could hear that. When Reverend starts talking about Lazarus, you see Orel, he like grabs onto the pew, he gets really into it, and like he pulls himself up. Eyes are wide looking at Reverend, just trying to really fully engage with this. Right off the bat, we see that Orel is a true believer, which, if this show is any indication, true believers can be very, very dangerous.
Oh,
Well,
yeah.
and we see it later, too, but the issue is he's a true believer, and he's a child who takes every single word said to him as literal.
Oh, yeah, like most children do.
And especially if it's about God or
Yeah.
religion. Like, it...
Yep. So does it ever said, like, what denomination they are? Is it just supposed to be, like, an umbrella Christian?
They did say that's not very Protestant. That's as far as I've...
Yeah, and they're like, at least it's not Catholic. And I was like, even these people don't like Catholics.
For me, as someone whose father was Irish Catholic and whose mother was Southern Baptist...
What a combo.
Oh, dude, the fights, man. My mom and dad would be screaming at each other, talking down each other's churches. My dad would be like, you just want to go to your church because they get up and singing and dancing every day.
I always said that if I wasn't raised in the Catholic Church, which is arguably the most boring denomination church because they're so like, where like if I was raised in like a mega church or a Southern Baptist church where everybody's like high energy and happy and just dancing, I don't know if I would have been able to get out of it as fast as I did because they're just speaking in tongues. It's this big elaborate show where the main part of me not paying attention in church was because I was bored out of my mind.
Yeah, and I really wanted to go to the Southern Baptist one because in the Catholic Church, when you go up and you do your communion and you receive the blood of Jesus, it was like literal wine. But at the Southern Baptist, it was like just grape juice.
Yeah.
So it was tastier. And then I was a kid, and they would take all the kids downstairs to do their own little sermon, but it was puppets. So there was one puppet named Spaz who would talk about Jesus and how much he loved Jesus. And yeah, they used to pass out Bibles that were graphic novels of the Bible, which I thought that was pretty cool. But it's such a... And I did a public speech about this for class at one point about like how kids are really exploited as these big markets for corporations to just like dig into and be able to like push them in one way or another to really get them into their brand or their whatever they're selling. Same goes for this. Orel is one of those people that, especially as a kid, true believer, wants to be a good person, wants to do good, so he's going to take what he learns and try to adapt it into his everyday life. Orel's friend Dowie, again, we're doing another clay thing, another stop motion, Dowie, arrives to hang out, and Orel sees this as an opportunity to talk out his thoughts on Lazarus and the gift of God. I quote Dowie here as something that I really, really hung on to. Orel, you know you're not supposed to think when it comes to God and faith.
I wrote that down too.
She's like, I know.
Did you mention how in the sermon the priest said that life is as precious as money?
I didn't catch. I see. The second time around, I caught that, and I was like, I should write that down, and then I didn't. But yeah, or he compares it to the little tiny zebras we keep up on the fridge. You know,
Yeah.
It's as precious as money. And I love the little conversation that the Reverend and Clay have at each other. He's like, I heard you guys talking during. He's like, oh, just practicing my lip syncing, Reverend. Love those greatest hits.
Got him. Fucking roasted.
And then Orel's like, I agree with you about whatever. And he's like, yes, that's why I make good money or whatever. It's like,
I love how heavy-handed it comes into, especially when he's like, can I go hang out with Dowie? And they're like,
don't ride with strangers. And he's like, why? And he's like, because you're wearing your Sunday's best.
Yeah, you're in a
Obviously.
good Sunday suit.
Well, and you even see that too when they're driving to church, and it's like, yeah, they want to protect their kids so much, and then the dad starts smoking, just like all the smoke is like going right into the brother's name, Shapey. Mm-hmm. He rolls his window all the way down, so he falls out the window later. Like, yeah, it's one of those things like, yes, we take our kids to church to protect them, while simultaneously like, you're not protecting shit.
I think a lot of parents in that community think that that's the church and like school's job is to teach your children and to protect your children, and they just have to feed and clothe and shelter them off hours.
They arrive at, did you guys catch the name of the cemetery?
No, what was it?
They arrive at Fading Smiles Cemetery.
Fading Smiles.
Where Orel makes the statement that everyone buried there makes bad Christians because they threw the gift of life back into God's face. Dowie is worried about his grandpa sinning in the afterlife, so they decide they need to go to the library to see what they can do.
His headstone just says, Dowie's dead grandpa.
Yeah.
I don't think I get this reference, but I like the tagline that they have at the library. The library itself is called Thomas Bowdler's Library, which I don't know who Thomas Bowdler is. I probably should have looked that up. But the tagline of it says, Purifying Literature Since 1818.
What happened in 1818?
I don't know. This is probably my favorite interaction in the entire episode. I think this is one of the characters that I'm going to find the most funny. They go to the library. They go to Thomas Bowdler's library, and we meet Miss Censordoll, who is putting a pile of books together to burn. Named Miss Censordoll. It's like Censor It All or Censored Doll.
Yes.
She's such a terrible person. Did you guys see the pile of books that she had up there? Ready to burn?
I saw like Fahrenheit 451 was on there.
They had Animal Farm.
Animal Farm, yeah.
They had the Necronomicon, thank you.
Twilight.
Well, actually, under that, they had How Stella Got Her Groove Back. I've never heard of that, so I looked it up. It is a book. It came out in 1998. Stella Payne is a highly successful 40-something San Francisco, California stockbroker who is persuaded by her colorful New York City girlfriend, Delilah Abraham, to take a well-deserved first-class vacation to Jamaica. As she soaks in the beauty of the island, she encounters a strapping young islander, Winston Shakespeare. His pursuits for her turn into a hot and steamy romance that forces Stella to take personal inventory of her life and try to find a balance between her desire for love and companionship and the responsibilities of mother and corporate executive.
I hate when you're like rich and successful and you just need to take a vacation.
Yeah.
And you can just afford to take a vacation.
And then you like fall in love with a hunk on the beach. Oh, it's just so exhausting.
Dude, I love those Hallmark movies. I know they're all garbo, but it's so funny to me.
Oh, it is.
Did you see in the background what was on the shelves? It was in the We Recommend section.
No, it wasn't.
There were 3 things on the recommendations in the background. It was Understanding a Fool's Journey, A Guide to Closed-Mindedness, and How to Thwart Pleasurable Sex. I think it was Dowie says, they teach us a lot. And Miss Sensordoll says, in fact, they teach us too much.
Yeah, sure do.
I don't know if we got her name, but she comes over while Orel and Doey are talking to Miss Sensordoll, and she says, "Hey, Jimmy's looking through the Renaissance art books again." And then she's like, "Oh, what was the 15th century art?" And then she gets up, cracks her knuckles, and goes. And that's when Orel steals the Necronomicon. They all skedaddle and they go back to the cemetery.
Doodly-doo.
Funny that you say doodly-doo there.
Because his grandpa's doodly-doo was there.
Oh, yeah. Doey's a little upset that Orel stole the book because that's one of the big commandments. And Orel says, sometimes you have to break one commandment to keep another. He goes through the Necronomicon. They dig up his grandpa. Doey's like, oh, God, he smells. And he's like, oh, it's probably because he's been wearing the same pair of underwear for, like, ever.
That's another sin. Mom says cleanliness is next to godliness.
It sure is. Let's take his clothes off. Then, after he's alive, he can go put on some fresh things.
Good idea, but you do it. I don't think I should see Grampy's doodly-doo.
What a
Okie
great
dokie.
description of a dick.
Don't
He's
think.
so into
Yikes.
doing it, too.
Phew! He ought to air out in a bit. Okay, here goes nothing. I conjure thee by the fire of Gira and by the lights of Shamash, in the name of the covenant, come and rise up before me. Ia Masaratu Bagaloma Kia.
That doesn't sound very Protestant, Orel.
Well, at least it's not Catholic.
Catholic.
Ghost. Did your parents ever say that cleanliness is next to godliness?
All the time.
Oh, yeah.
Summer vacation. What do you mean I gotta get up and go, like, clean myself?
I just went swimming.
Hey. So after he raises his grandfather from the dead, Officer Ochunk finds the two boys. But before he can stop them, Doey's grandpa rises from the dead, thanks God for the bounty, and then eats the officer's brains. Orel is overjoyed and proceeds to strip the police officer who Orel no doubts raises back to life. We cut downtown where Orel's zombie apocalypse is underway as the dead all thank God for their meal before devouring the citizens.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. That just got me so hard that they do a little prayer.
And how some of them are like, God is great, God is good, let's sing for our food. And the other one's like, rub-a-dub-dub, thanks for the grub.
Yeah.
How often did you have to say grace?
Every single meal at home.
For some reason, my parents did not make us go to church, did not make us do all that shit, but we did say grace, which was just the God is great, God is good, let us like, and we would get through it, God's great, God's good, amen.
I think that it is a nice sentiment to like give thanks for like the food that you have when people don't have food. But yeah, yours wasn't draped in Christianity, really. It was just kind of like an omnipotent God. But yeah, every single meal that we ate at home, because you're not supposed to pray before meals in public.
Was your grace always different or was it always the same?
It was always the same, if I could think of it. As soon as my parents start saying it, like to this day, I automatically just goes into it, but I'm like, what was
It
it?
doesn't start with thank you.
What was your grace? Maybe it's the same.
It was literally my dad would just say, thank God for this feast that we have bestowed upon us. He used to say it with so much word salad that I just tuned it out every time. And
Did he improv every time?
Most of the time, yeah. He's like, yeah, don't worry, I'm thinking.
I'm talking from the heart. God, now it's going to bother me. I can't think of it.
To me, I thought it was funny. Do you remember the movie Hook with Robin Williams?
Oh, yeah.
There's a point where they're about to eat, and they're like, oh, wait, we have to say grace first. And so, like, Robin Williams, like, folds his hands, and he's about to say his prayer, and then they just go, grace! And they grab the food. I saw that movie once. We were about to do grace, and I was like, I'm going to be a little funny guy. And I was like, grace! And I reached for a biscuit, and I got smacked.
Oh, no. Would you guys hold hands at the table?
No,
neither would we.
Yeah.
My mom's Protestant family would all hold hands, and it would freak me out. I'd be like, what are we doing here?
If I felt more connection, I feel like the holding hands thing could strengthen the bond, but when you're just forced to do it, and I can imagine you doing it with your siblings, just like I would be holding my brother's hand, and he'd be like mad that he had to hold my hand.
I know they got rid of the handshake of peace, which would always give me anxiety every single time.
Would you always have to pinpoint the ones you were going to go for beforehand?
Yeah, like what order I was going to go in. I'm going to go for this guy and then this lady. I'm going to make sure my hands aren't sweaty.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You're rubbing them on their clothes to make sure that, yeah. I remember my hands were super sweaty, and I had to say that, like, I dunked my hand in the holy water that they would have on the seats. Like, sorry, I just dunked.
Holy sweat.
Yeah. So we cut to Miss Sensordoll with her community book burning. Someone asked her if she was going to burn the Bible, to which she says, only the Jewish parts. When I first saw that, I laughed so loud and hard. The zombies arrive, causing the book burners to form an angry mob, holding the burning books as torches. Did you catch the book she used as a torch?
No, what book should she use?
The Last Temptation of Christ. I didn't know anything about that book. I assumed it was just like another Bible thing. But I looked it up. The Last Temptation of Christ reinterprets the life of Jesus Christ, depicting him as a deeply human figure struggling with doubt, fear, and the temptation to abandon his divine mission, to live a normal life with Mary Magdalene, ultimately choosing to embrace his suffering and sacrifice on the cross to fulfill his destiny as the Son of God. So that actually sounds like a very good book that I probably would have enjoyed reading as a kid, because it would make me feel like we're not supposed to be perfect. We're all dealing with this. I think the humanization of Jesus would have led a lot of people down a better path. But nope, not for Miss Sensordoll. Got to burn that shit right up.
They love to forget the fact that he was also a human. They just like to focus on the God part, I guess.
The God part, the fact that he's a magic man who can turn wine into water or water into wine or whatever the fuck it was. Cast out the demons and heal the blind, and then pretend like he doesn't also think that he might not want to die.
Right.
We cut to Forgetty's pub, where Orel's father, Clay, is relieving himself outside. A stranger behind him is waiting for him. Clay says, just one more shake. And the stranger says, I'd give it another one if I were you. I'm pretty sure that character comes back up again.
I caught episodes of Moral Orel like here and there when it originally aired. I did recognize this character. So yeah, he's definitely not only comes back, but he's like a main character.
I was so sheltered, I didn't even realize this was a show until probably 3 years ago.
Were you not allowed to watch Adult Swim?
Oh, absolutely not. I watched it once with my mom in the room, and I believe the Oblongs were
Oh
on.
my goodness.
And
fuck.
I guess somebody gets thrown into a wood chipper or some shit, and my mom was like, what are you watching? And I was like, I don't know, it's a cartoon. And she's like, turn this shit.
Damn.
And that was the last time I got to watch Adult Swim.
Me and Eddie were watching South Park one time with my grandmother in the room, and it was an episode where Earth was a TV show, and they were going to cancel it, but they were trying to get up to these producers and try to convince them not to cancel Earth, and they just followed them throughout their day. And the scene that my grandmother was watching with us was when they hired a sex worker to suck their shoulder spikes or whatever. They're like, yeah, suck my shoulder spike. And my grandma's an incredibly religious person, about fucking punted that TV in. She was so fucking mad. And Ed's like, fuck off, I'm watching.
Little baby Ed. Fuck off.
Oh, dude, you have no idea. I was just talking to him the other day about his YTP phase, where he would walk in and then go, ooh, and then walk right back out in reverse.
I did remember the prayer that we would do before meals.
What was the prayer?
Bless us, O Lord, and these thy gifts, which we are about to receive from thy bounty through Christ our Lord. Amen. And I just burst into flames right now. Saying,
I'm going to take that and make that your ringtone.
no, God, I mean, yeah, I call you so much.
Oh, that's true. You didn't even have my number left.
Nope. How many years have we been friends? I've never had your number.
So Orel's dad, Clay, is still pissing outside, and he overhears his son talking to Doey, and Doey is saying, like, wait, she didn't get any blood on her. And he's like, yeah, but these clothes are too revealing. She looks like a tramp.
That didn't make any sense to me, because the logic is she's too revealing, so let's strip her to be more revealing?
Our God is an awesome God, he reigns from heaven above.
Oh, what a time.
Orel sees up to see his father standing above him, angry. Clay tells Orel to meet him in his study.
In the den? I mean, what a Leave It to Beaver fucking reference that is. I can see the pull from that. I mean, like, talk to me in my study, son. Let's have a father-son moment in the study.
So this is one of those situations, again, if this is similar for you, Adele, please correct me. But as a boy raised in a Catholic sense, we didn't call it the study, but we definitely had a place where punishments were doled out, because we cut to the study and Orel is pulling his pants up. Did you miss that?
Yeah, I missed that. Well, I'll say this about Mary and Bob. Never got spanked. Never got spanked. But getting yelled at anywhere in the house. There was no special room.
Yep.
Even if you were, like, in the bathroom, she'd yell at you through the door. It's fine. I mean, as a boy's perspective, like, my brothers did get spanked. I didn't, because I was a girl. And we're like glass.
There's a sign, like a plaque in the den, in the study, that says, spare the rod and spoil the child.
Yeah.
Which is an old religious saying that pretty much says, if you spare the rod, it means not to hit your son or daughter with a rod. Kind of. So it's the theory of, if you spare the rod, if you ease back on the discipline, then your child becomes spoiled. It says in the saying, spare the rod, spoil the child. The plaque on his wall in the study has a fucking gun on it.
Yeah.
I miss that. I gotta pay attention to the background more.
There's a lot going on in the background.
I heard spare the rod, spoil the child constantly. I heard that phrase all of the time.
Let's be real. It's a justification for spanking your child, right? I mean, nothing more than that.
Yeah.
I think this is kind of a running theme throughout the show, is that in the study, this is when Orel gets spanking. Because as soon as we cut in, he's pulling up his pants, and his dad's holding the belt and just, like, slamming it down on his hands, and Orel's like, geez, Dad, I'm sorry. Orel is sorrowfully explaining how he only wanted to stop the dead sinners from spitting phlegm into God's face. But Clay points out that there are other ways of preserving God's gift of life. And the quote that I have is, nudity is a horrible thing and should only be committed as a last resort. Please remember the 11th commandment. Thou shalt be ashamed of thy natural anatomy. To which Orel says, those lost commandments always throw me off.
God, that's so felt.
They really hammer that home of, like, don't be naked. Like, that is such a shameful thing. All of the citizens are more worried about the zombies being naked than they are about their brains being eaten.
I was going to say, it's just a perfect picture of the church as a whole. They're so focused on things like nudity, they're not worried about the fact that their brains are being manipulated or eaten in this sense.
I think that's a perfect metaphor. Clay says that this is why everyone was running away. Not because people were afraid of their brains being eaten, but because they are naked. Cut back downtown, where the Morrilton citizens are showing more concern with the nakedness of the dead. Orel says, "You sure are right, Dad." To which Clay responds, "That's why they call me Dad, and not Mom."
Wow.
But the two laugh before Clay tells Orel he has one more thing to do. And we cut to Orel handing out clothes to all of the zombies who continue their havoc on the townspeople. But this time, as they're being eaten, they seem enormously happier now that they're not naked. One of the last quotes.
I'm sorry I goofed up. I was just trying to be good, so you could love me more than you do now.
Oh, Orel, I could never love you more. People only have a certain amount of love in them, and I'm afraid I have to divide mine up between at least a dozen people.
Oh.
But remember, son, I love you enough.
I love you enough too, Dad.
And after he slaps the zombie away with his belt, his pants fall down, and we cut to Orel making his own stop-motion film as the credits roll. And that was Season 1, Episode 2 of Moral Orel.
So when these are released on DVD, though, is this still released as Episode 1, or is this considered Episode 2 on...
I believe in the DVD, Lord's Greatest Gift is still the first episode. How do we feel about the episode?
This show's gonna fucking destroy me.
Knowing kind of where some of the storylines go and stuff like that, it is, for a Clay stop-motion animation, so heavy, and it gets into so much stuff.
I mean, I obviously haven't seen the show, but I know that it gets a lot darker than it is. I still was having like visceral reactions to like the opening scene of them entering the church and then just the church music or like the little sayings that, you know, people would say throughout my childhood, just automatically making me cringe and my body hurt. So the fact that it gets darker from here, I'm like, oh, I'm going to have a time with this series.
This is one of those things that I was concerned with because we're trying to make a fun little happy podcast here. We're not trying to get super duper dark, but I think the conversation is very important, especially now.
Especially now, dude. And that's all I'm going to say about that.
Exactly. Maybe, hey, if we feel like we want to expand the line as far as boundaries and how our community feels about where they want the conversations to go, where they feel comfortable for these conversations to go, that's different. For now, I just want to stick to the show.
Right.
But I know there's a lot of people out there just going through the community of people talking about this show. They speak very, very highly of it. Just seeing it and feeling like someone was acknowledging the type of ridiculousness that they've gone through was enough for them to just go and feel free and to be better. That is a question I actually have for you guys because this is the first time I saw this. This is the only episode of Moral Orel I've ever seen. I've seen like clips here and there and just talkings of. But if we do continue this, I was going to ask how you felt about me watching the entire show first, and then if we do another episode of this, you guys still don't see the show, but I've at least been there around the block.
I feel like that would be a good plan of action for you to watch it all the way through. Just overall better understanding of the show as a whole, since you have the reins of this one. So it's like, yeah, it just makes sense to me. Because I like going in blind.
I don't know how it's going to affect me, which is why I want to go by myself. Because Dino talks about what he wanted from a Season 4 and a Season 5. The way that Season 4 was apparently on a direction to go towards, Orel was going to mature. And he was going to start seeing the cracks. And Season 4 was going to be more like Clay and Orel being more antagonistic towards each other.
That would have been, honestly, that would have been really good to see.
And even without Season 4 and Season 5, he wanted to rename the show from Moral Orel to Moralton.
Really?
All the episodes were going to be about the townspeople. But just to see the direction it was going to go and to feel like it was stolen, I can completely understand how the community feels about that. Knowing where it was going to go and then seeing how the community still feels about it being cut up too short and only having those 3 seasons, everyone who has been a fan of it that I've seen in the community has said it's a masterpiece. They still think it's amazing. It's one of the most underrated Adult Swim shows of all time.
I can see that it being underrated as like a double-edged sword because I personally didn't really get into this show because I understood the concept of this show and it addressing this, you know, religious trauma. And I personally never really had that growing up. So for me, it was something that I had a really hard time relating to. And it just felt weird to just watch this show and be like, yeah, religious people do be like that. You know, because I felt like I had no horse in the race. You know what I mean? The inverse of that, I feel like people who did have religious trauma or are still currently dealing with religious trauma would probably see this and be like, no. I can't deal with this show right now. So I can see how it had a very specific niche of a fan base and why it wasn't so widely received, but also simultaneously why now, all these years later, you know, almost 20 years later, it still has an active fan base. It still has an active community. It probably resonates with more people now than it did back then. So I understand the popularity and the longevity of it. But also, again, I get why maybe it was underrated on Adult Swim, which besides the content of where the show goes, maybe kind of lack of views or kind of response is also the reason they decided to cut it short to 3 seasons as opposed to 5.
The way that the show is structured, there's no commentary until Season 3, unfortunately.
Damn.
Wow.
I was looking forever to find a commentary on a Season 1. The only interviews I found were from the team Orel.com. I really wanted to know more about it, and I'm so interested in the commentary. And there's only 3 episodes that have commentary throughout the entire show.
And how many episodes per season?
The first season has 10.
Damn, you could knock out the whole series in just like a couple days if you wanted to.
I'm probably going to watch it twice. The first time I'm just going to enjoy it. The second time I'm going to start taking notes. Season 1 has 10 episodes. Season 2 has 20 episodes.
Damn, all right.
The season 1 got really good ratings, apparently. He didn't have a team to write with. He wrote these by himself, the first 10 episodes by himself. Season 2, that changed a little bit. But then season 3 had 13 episodes. I don't know how many exactly they ordered, but they just cut it right down the middle.
So because they ended it so short, does the last episode kind of like leave you on a cliffhanger or like wanting more, or like there's more story?
I'm sure it does. Like, I haven't seen it.
Yeah. Oh, right. Duh.
We all have those shows, like Twin Peaks, My Name is Earl, like those shows that just leave you wanting more. And that usually keeps me from watching a show, is if it ends badly or if it doesn't have an ending. Like Pushing Daisies was a show I really, really liked, and it just got canceled. I can never go back because I'm just edging myself. Like, why am I going to watch a show that I really like that has no conclusion? But from what everyone's told me, it's a great show. But again, this is kind of like a pilot episode, proof of concept. For home movies, we grade it every episode. I don't know how we want to go about this. There's an idea I had where we would like rate it based off of the 7 layers of hell.
Yes, sleepy, dopey, doc.
So now that we're at the end of the episode, any thoughts on the episode? It is the pilot. We have no real basis for it. So I was going to say we don't have to grade the episode.
Yeah, I think this being the first kind of pilot and concept episode, I don't think we necessarily have to give grades. But I definitely think that this episode of Moral Orel as a first episode was really good. Established a lot of things, kind of the ridiculousness of this universe. We have zombies, we have all that kind of stuff, but also the seriousness that religion plays in this Moralton type town. I think it also gives us a good representation of who Morel is he's a kid, he's very religious, and he takes everything very, very, to the T serious, literal even. So it's going to be interesting to see where that gets us in the show.
Well, we did grade the first episode of Home Movies.
I guess
not
that's true.
Knowing like what was going to unfold before us. But it's up to you guys. I don't mind giving it a grade.
But like we were doing before, like just a regular school grade? Is there some kind of religious grade we can give it?
I was trying to figure out something we could do involving with religion. That's why I was like, maybe the 7 stages of hell, but that's just like the 7 deadly sins. Orel's a kid. He goes to school. Maybe we could just keep it.
Yeah.
Sure.
I'm going to give it a B for zombies.
Zombies.
Plus, I feel like it's a good middle of the road.
I'm going to give it a B for blasphemy.
Well, I'm going to give it a B because I don't know why. I don't know. It was a good episode. I like these 11-minute episodes.
Yeah.
It keeps everything moving nice and quick. There's something about the whole concept at the end where we got a still of like the end credits going on where Morel is doing a stop motion as well. And then we even see that at the end. Something about the concept of like them doing the thing inside of the thing, like them doing stop motion inside of stop motion. I don't know. That shit always cracks me up.
Real quick, what's the main character's name, Tim?
Morel?
It's Orel.
Oh, yeah. Orel. He is Morel. His name is Orel. Yes. He is Morel. Sorry.
No worries. I just didn't want someone to comment and be like,
Yeah. So Morel, and then his brother is...
You said Moral.
God damn it. Orel is his name. He is Morel.
Yes.
His brother is Shapey. Dad is Clay.
His mom is Blowberta.
Blauberta. Dowie is his friend.
Miss Censordoll.
Yes.
I'll get this down. His name is Orel.
Yes.
I'm saying that right now so we know it's true. Do I say Orel weird?
No, you don't say oral weird.
Do you remember the Reverend's name?
Oh, God.
Motherfuck.
Reverend Motherfuck.
That's not his name.
Reverend Motherfuck.
Reverend Tellus.
No, it wasn't Tellus.
God damn it.
It's Reverend Putty.
Putty,
Reverend
of course.
Putty. That was my second choice.
Hey, Peter.
First episode, do you guys have any favorite characters or any characters you don't like?
Not a fan of the dad.
Yeah.
I wrote in my notes that the dad's, when he was driving them out of the church, his eyes were so dead.
Yeah.
One of my favorite parts is when the Reverend's talking, and then it cuts to Clay judging him so hard. And I want to take that picture, and I want to use that as a reaction GIF. Just start saying it to people.
I have opinions about the dad, but I also, like I said, I've seen episodes here and there, so I do know kind of where some of his story goes, so I don't want to say too much. But
I don't like Dowie, but that's only because...
He's a little whiny bitch. No, I'm just
a
kidding.
little bit, yeah. You're right. Adele said it, not me. Miss Censor Doll is probably my favorite, though, because she's fucking crazy. So, that was Season 1, Episode 2, technically, the pilot episode of Moral Orel. I'm glad everybody stuck around with us, and if you like this, let us know if you want to hear more. I don't even know if we're going to drop this at any point. We could drop it in between seasons and see how people feel, but this is just a proof of concept. Maybe people want to hear more, maybe they don't. This is just one of those little test things that we drop out there. That's why in the beginning I said a possible weekly show that we watch and break down. So... how about we get into those plugs?
I'm reaching into my bag of infinite projects here. Season of the Curse 2 is a home movie about two wannabe YouTubers haunted by Halloween spirits in the form of intrusive thoughts. In order to save themselves, they must go inside their own minds to battle toxic masculinity, misogyny, depression, and self-doubt. Everyone that's in this podcast is helping make that film come to life, including my YouTube brother-in-arms, Punkin' Nonstop, who has over 1,000 videos on his YouTube channel, not a hyperbole. It's got tons of independent musicians who have agreed to let us use music or downright make music from scratch for the film. I'm really excited for it. It's one of the first film projects that I actually really believe in the story, and I believe that a lot of people would benefit from seeing it, and I can't wait to see what people think.
Hell yeah. We did not plan that.
No, we didn't. I think we're a unit at this point.
Oh yeah.
An absolute unit.
So sometimes I paint, sometimes I make things, and sometimes I post that on my Instagram, which is the Artisanal of Oddity. That is Artisanal of Oddity at www.instagram.com. And that's my plug.
And as always, this podcast is brought to you by the Happy Corner Podcast. They were nice enough to donate equipment to us so we could keep this podcast going. So we always want to give them a nice little shout out at the end. The Happy Corner Podcast streams every Sunday at 1:45 Central. And then you can get the audio version wherever you get your podcasts. That's going to do it for this experimental episode of Rewatching Moral Orel. Join us next week for our regular format where we cover Home Movies Season 2, Episode 11, Writer's Block. If you liked what you heard, check out our Linktree at Linktree/RHMpod. There you can like, follow, and subscribe, send us an email, or leave us a 5-star review. I will read 5-star reviews on the podcast. Thanks to Shannon Conway for the refresh of our logo and Chris Bongat for the use of our theme song. On behalf of myself, Tim, and my co-host Marcin, and Adele, thank you for rewatching Moral Orel with us. We'll see you next week. Bye.